Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome. Wow, 74 folks. All right. Y'all are excited for today's stream. I'm glad. I hope I don't let you down. I know our guest won't, but your mileage may vary with me. What's up? What's up, Mahir? Charles, thanks for being here. King, what's up? Eamon, what's going on, y'all? What's up? What's up? Who watched the Super Bowl this last week? Put a 1 in the chat. Drop a 1 for Chiefs. Drop a 2 for 49ers. And drop a 3 for I don't care. What's up, Mahir? What's going on? Amen. How are you? Hey, Charles again. Charles in the chat with 2. 49ers. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Hey, Robson. I don't care. Most people don't care. This is a decidedly U.S. phenomenon. I don't think any of the rest of the world cares, do they? Do other countries care about the Super Bowl? Let me know. Like, we watch, U.S. watches World Cup. Unless it's the women's team, we're not ever in it. Or we're out very early, but we keep watching. We like soccer. I mean, football. Soccer. This is all very confusing now. Malaku, we're Ethiopian. Nice. Welcome, Ethiopia. Not so much. Don't care. No, nobody cares. Nobody cares about the Super Bowl. Nice. What's up? What's up, Brazil? Thanks for being here. Only watch for the halftime show for Usher. You didn't watch for there's another famous person that was there who's been in the news a lot. We won't mention their name. Hey, what's up, King? Love from Iraq. What's up, Iraq? Thanks for being here. 4, Taylor Swift. Nice. So your 7-year-old daughter watched the Super Bowl with you? That's rad. Because of Taylor Swift. Live from Oakland. What's up, California?
I found this on the web for your 7-year-old daughter. Watch this.
Whoa!
That's red.
My Siri just went off.
Check it out.
All right, y'all. We got a great stream for y'all today. This one's particularly special because it's a very popular thing, and we're glad to have them with us. Figma is going to be here in just a second to show you some things they've been doing with Visual Studio Code for developers and designers and bringing those things together. I'm excited about that because I do use Figma myself, but also because we use it a lot here at Microsoft. So yeah, if you're using Figma, drop a 1 in the chat right there. That'll work. All right, it is Super Bowl commercials. What was your favorite one? Did y'all watch? You can watch them on YouTube. There's one. My favorite was the Dunk Kings with Ben Affleck. I thought that was really good. Chiefs. Yes, Charles. Exactly. See? Y'all go to YouTube and Google this. It's awesome. All right. Let's get to the good stuff here. And the good stuff is Figma. So before we do that, it is Thursday, and that means it's time for our TikTok throwback or throwback TikTok. I can never remember. Let's go ahead and roll that.
I was surprised to find out that one of my developer friends was not aware of this, but where you're changing themes in VS Code, do not just scroll down with your mouse like this, searching for themes. Instead, use your up and down cursor, so then this way you can experience each theme while you're searching for it. And most importantly, don't forget at the very top here, you have additional themes you can choose from.
That music on that TikTok was extremely, what's the word? Very dramatic. It was great. All right. Well, look, without further ado, so you don't have to listen to me blabber on anymore, chat, because your time is valuable. We know that. We have a Figma here, and actually Jake, I'm gonna try real hard. We practiced this before the stream. Jake Albaugh.
Hey, great.
Did you get it? Yes.
Very good.
Jake is here from Figma. Jake, is this true? You are the first developer advocate at Figma.
Yeah, I've been at Figma for 2 years. I was the first developer advocate. We now have 2 developer advocates.
There's 2 of you, but prior to that, you spent 12 years in the NFL.
Yeah, I was a linebacker for the Chicago Bears. You may have heard of me. No, I
have your card, actually. Yes. All right.
No, I was a software engineer.
software engineer for 12 years prior. And also, I learned that 1/3 of Figma users are developers. And for those who don't know what Figma is,
Yeah.
what is Figma?
Figma is Figma design is the best place to kind of design and build a product, place to collaborate. Figma is multiplayer at its core. And so it's kind of democratizing design, allowing everyone to kind of participate in the design process, kind of breaking down some of those barriers. I don't know how familiar you are with how design used to be, but it used to kind of be present your thing, get critiqued, go into a dark hole, revise, and come back out.
You know,
And
I'm not a designer, although it's like it's one of those things where I'm not a singer either, but like if I could ask for a gift, it would be to sing or be a designer. But I have used tools like Sketch app in the past. I've used what else have I used? I've tried to use Photoshop with little to no success because I just can't figure out the UI. I'm not smart enough for that tool. And I have used Figma, of course, because we use that now. But I guess the collaboration aspect, is that what is unique about the tool itself?
yeah, and we have I'll give a little deck here in a second, kind of like overviewing some of the stuff, but like we have multiple products. We've got FigJam, which is, our brainstorming whiteboarding tool, Figma Design, which is, where you can do designs, whether you're designing for the web, Android, iOS, what have you. But then we also have Dev Mode now, which just came out of beta. And that's kind of like the best way for developers to engage with a design file, and help understand, it helps developers kind of understand what the designer's intent was and that sort of thing.
Now, when we say 1/3 of Figma users are developers, does that mean that developers are designing in Figma?
They can, some do, but a lot of times developers are coming to Figma to either participate in like a handoff process. Handoff's an ugly word, like, because it kind of like implies a single moment, but anyone who kind of like collaborates with design knows that that isn't always a single moment. But developers come in to like, hey, here's the implications of this little design decision that you thought was going to be like a 1-minute lift. It actually would translate to a 3-month like refactor of our
Oh.
checkout flow or something. So like being able to participate in the like get ahead of those problems to save time, like
Oh, that makes so much
so
sense. Yeah, so
developers are coming in all the time.
Chad, are you familiar with this? I know exactly what Jake's referring to here because I recently had a project where we had a design. We got the design. It was for a side project, but just trying to implement the design, I was like, man, there was like this one arc that went across the bottom that we needed to do with CSS. And I was like, if this little gradient arc wasn't here, we could knock a week off of this, this implementation. So
Exactly.
yeah.
And a lot of times like those design decisions aren't like, I don't know how many times I'd run into a thing where it'd be like, hey, just so you know, like this is a much bigger deal than you think it is. And they're like, oh, I didn't even care. Yeah, sure. We don't need to do that at all. Like that wasn't even that important to us. And it's really important to have those conversations to like clarify that stuff. Cause if you're dealing with that, like later down the line, like you spend, a week building some and then you hit that problem, you've wasted an entire week.
Yeah. You got to
get in the design file earlier, catch it earlier, that sort of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Figma's a great way to do that.
So there definitely will be a demo today. Good point here. And in fact, let's get right to that. So let's get Jake's screen. Are you ready, Jake? Can we put your screen up?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
You'll notice this is going to be a meta day. We're actually going to give a slideshow presentation inside of VS Code through the Figma for VS Code extension, which is kind of fun. So my intro slides right now. This is I'll get to. We'll do a proper demo on how we even got here, but I'll give a couple slides here first. So Figma for VS Code is basically one way to think about this is you have Figma, which has traditionally been the designer's home, right? And developers come to the designer's home to visit all the time, right? And we've created Dev Mode, which is a new place inside of Figma it's almost like a room for developers in the designer home. You can leave a bag, leave a toothbrush, that sort of thing. Figma for VS Code is basically putting a portal to that room inside of the developer's home, right? If the developer's spending all their time in VS Code, the last thing they want to do is have to like go walk down the block to the designer's house. And so Figma for VS Code is our way of kind of like creating that direct link straight into Figma inside of VS Code. So big context here for those that like might not have as much. Figma is really trying to consider all three steps of the product development cycle, starting as early as brainstorming, ideation, all the logistical like work that goes into like planning out projects, determining what are the priorities, that sort of thing. And then in the middle, we have the design stage, right, where this is actually being turned into something visual and interactive conceptually. And then last but not least, we have build. So those three things at Figma, we kind of have three different products now. So FigJam, which came out in 2022, is kind of that early brainstorm phase. Then everyone's really familiar with Figma Design, which is in the middle. And then we just came out of beta at the end of January on dev mode, which is kind of this like first big step, embracing that existing developer experience. Like we said, a third of our users are developers, like embracing the fact that developers are coming to our tool and actually giving them something that's easy for them to actually use with them in mind. So everyone wants to bring quality designs to prod faster. But doing that in practice, if you're a developer, you know that can be really hard collaborating with designers. And so this like new dev mode thing is a new space in Figma for developers to communicate, like we were saying, with their designers, get that back and forth, cutting things off before they become problems. Also, it's a great way to leverage design systems more efficiently. I don't know how much experience you have with design systems, but like design systems, the way Figma thinks about patterns in design is actually very similar to the way like a lot of front-end developers think about components and component libraries in code. And so there's an opportunity there to align those patterns, align that language, to seamlessly kind of go straight from design to development more effectively using design systems. And ultimately this yields faster or higher quality, higher fidelity output, and it gets you there more quickly. So one big hangup we know is a problem for a lot of developers is like context switching. Like the last thing you want to do is leave your environment and like leave only using your keyboard and have to go use your mouse somewhere like that. That really breaks your flow. It takes you out. That's a very easy way to start wasting 30-minute blocks at a time. And so with Figma for VS Code, we're bringing Figma to where you work already, right? So this allows you to actually get most of what you would be looking for inside of Figma externally inside of VS Code. So with that, we're actually going to just pop into this demo.
We're going to jump into Figma. All right, real quick, let's see here. Let's design VS Code inside Figma for VS Code. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's actually a very funny... Yeah, there's a very funny meta that I won't be able to demo right now, but like we also have our own extensibility platform where you can build Figma plugins, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I create tons of plugins as a developer, and it's actually really fun to develop my plugins while running them inside of the Figma for VS Code extension in development. So it becomes this like plugin development environment, which is actually kind of fun.
That's pretty wild. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this demo. We actually, so this like bringing things into the developer context, we have a word for this in Microsoft. It's called inner loop. I don't know if chat, have y'all heard that terminology before? But like we refer to whatever you do inside the editor is called the inner loop. And the more that you can stay in the inner loop as a developer, the more productive you are because you're not having to jump out to other things.
Yep. And it's not, I think something that like whenever I try to explain this to like non-developers, it's like, it's not just the time it takes to move your mouse to another application. It's a contextual switch in your brain that needs to flip that can be it can just totally derail your train of thought. Because so much of what we do as developers is based on momentum, and like that takes time to build. And so if you're losing that momentum, you have to start from scratch again, start going up the hill again. Absolutely. I like that concept. So you all have that formalized at Microsoft, like as like across.
Well, it's some of the terminology we use. Like, I don't know if other people, I don't think we invented that, but that's just what we call it, you know? So I'll hear people will say, talk about the inner loop. And sometimes we'll say that to like on videos and stuff. I'm like, I don't know that other people know. I think that's like an internal word. I don't think people know what that
Yeah.
means. But. All right.
Okay, so let's start from scratch here. So like I had a file open to give that little mini slide deck. But at the root, once you've installed the extension and you've authenticated with Figma, you actually get your recents, which we have a whole bunch of files in here. We have shared files, and then we also have, you can star files in Figma, like in the Figma app. And so I have 3 that we're going to go through. The first one was the live stream deck that we just looked at. But I'm going to pop open this like demo file that we have here. And this is a file that we call World Peas. It's like this fake product that we kind of like build demos around. But it's a little bit of like a menu building e-commerce sort of thing. And as you can see here, if you're familiar with Figma, traditionally you land in something that's like an infinite canvas. Like, and that's one of the strengths of Figma for designers, is the ability to just like go and have unlimited space. And one of the things that we heard from a lot of developers is that like that could be really overwhelming when you're trying to be like, I need to look for one single thing and process it. Last thing I want to do is be like scrolling X, Y everywhere, trying to find the dang thing. And so the default experience when you open a file now in the Figma for VS Code extension is this kind of like high level view of everything that's in that file, right? So we see we have a bunch of different screens here. If this was a more complex file, we might benefit from like being able to like, what did we call it? Category, right? You can filter and search inside of here. And when we click on any of these, we're going to jump straight to that section or that part of the file. And we actually don't have an infinite canvas. Now, the infinite canvas is actually right here. We can toggle this on and off into this kind of like focused view, which we land in by default. And then this is kind of the infinite canvas view if we want to take a peek at this entire file. But I'm going to go back here to this focus view because this allows me to just like look at this one thing that I'm trying to concentrate on. And we can jump using left and right here between the different sections in the file. So that's kind of the high level thing when you open the file, and then the focus view that you can go in and out of once you're in the file. But as we can see here, there's all these extra little things floating on top. And this is our new annotations feature. So our designer, whoever it is, we can call her Tina, put these annotations like on this as explicit call outs for me to pay attention to as a developer. So I can see that like, oh, this is, it's this specific variable in our design tokens or something. We can see what this value is here. And we can also like look at, the gap on like this vertical kind of auto layout flexbox thing. But what's really cool about annotations is that these are actually dynamic properties. So if the design file changes, our designers don't have to update these annotations. They're going to automatically update, right? So they've made a connection between like a specific value and an annotation. So these are what we're calling pin properties and annotations. We also have the ability to do rich text annotations. I don't know if I have a good example of it. Yeah, right here. Here we go. So you can also put rich text annotations on an annotation as well. So in this case, they're explicitly calling out that this is a selected item style. This isn't a component yet, so it's going to be a manual override, right? So you can kind of like communicate in natural language about, a specific piece here. On top of annotations, we also have the feature of comments. So if I just want to be like, I can mention, who am I going to mention? I'm going to mention my manager, Tom. Hey, Tom, this is cool with you. So for these kind of like more ephemeral conversations, comments are kind of like the things that are like, we're collaborating together. They're going to get closed. They might get replied to. They might have reactions on them. Annotations are more like, this is really tied to the design and not going to change unless the design changes, right? And so we have this kind of like back and forth with comments and annotations is two like distinctly different ways to kind of like talk about a piece of a design.
So for annotations, I actually just activated this in my own VS Code to look at we do our YouTube thumbs with Figma, and I really like that I don't have to. Usually all our thumbs are spread out across the canvas.
Yep.
And it's like,
Yep.
but now I can see them in rows, in columns, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Question here: can we filter and group by components instead of frames in the VS Code extension?
Filter and group by component. Oh, in this like fine frame. That's amazing feedback. How would you recommend grouping frames to ensure proper Figma file hierarchy and easy work for dev? That's a great question, Nicholas. So first of all, great suggestion about the finding and searching. Let me see if I have like the ability to, yeah, here we go. So in Figma, you have the ability to actually create sections. So sections are this way of kind of like grouping frames together. So in this case, we have one called the recipe feature, right? And it's just a big old gray section that has all of these frames inside of it. And this is the thing that you can actually say, hey, this section is ready for dev. You also have the ability in Figma design. These are design actions, so they're not present inside of here. You also have the ability to kind of say, hey, this frame specifically is ready for development. So you have the ability inside of Figma as a designer to draw sections around different pieces of your file, and those will be surfaced differently. An example of this, let's see here. So we can see, this is another file that I have. We can see that we have 3 different sections. This one doesn't have a name actually, or no, these aren't in a section. But then these 2, frames and components are actually inside sections. So when you wrap a section around something in Figma, in this view, it's going to get this nice little group like this. And we can actually see that at this level, all of it's in this recipe feature, right? So sections is a great way to categorize groups of frames. And then those sections and frames individually can be marked as ready for dev. But yeah, that's actually really, really good feedback on the component question. Like having kind of, maybe even being able to search for text contents or something like that might be a thing worth considering inside of this. Let me just make sure that actually just isn't. Yeah, that's not working right now. Okay. I wanted to make sure I was telling the truth there. Yeah. So we haven't implemented anything like that yet. Sometimes I'm always surprised. Like our team is constantly just like doing things, and like something that isn't a feature in the morning might be by the end of the day.
VS
so
Code's
I
the
always
same way. Yeah. People will say
Yeah.
VS Code should do this. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't do that. And then somebody be like, yeah, it does. We shipped it 2 releases
Yeah,
ago.
exactly.
Like,
By the time the recording comes out, who knows?
Yeah.
I already see our team making a note of that comment. So by the time the recording comes out, we might actually have something.
All right, let's keep going with the demo. We got some other questions, but we'll hold
Yeah.
them here because I feel like you're going to get to some of this stuff.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I also have, and this is actually, if we look at the file that I'm in, I created this like example org like code base that has kind of like a component library in here. We could see that we have some CSS. I'm actually going to shoot VS Code over to the side here. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because now that we're bigger, we want to make sure we're seeing everything. So let's look at the code for a second. We have like a button component in our UI library, right? And typically for folks that work with design systems, they kind of have this parity between, we have a component library in Figma, we have a component library in our code base. And so in this case, I have like, here's a really complex, well, no, that's on the wrong side. Here's like a complex button-based component, right? And I have TypeScript going, React, and I've like defined all of these properties for my button. I've got some accessibility enforced in here. And then this button base is actually being used by an icon button and a button component, right? Because they share a whole bunch of props, but they have their own distinct kind of properties. And so they're both sharing this button-based component. And then we have this button-based CSS, right? And in here, I've configured a whole bunch of CSS custom properties to do all the really smart kind of interactive stuff. So this component exists in our code base. As a design systems engineer, I've created this for my team so that my full stack, front end, back end engineers can easily implement these components. In Figma now, we're going to come over and look at the button component in our kind of like component library file. And I'm actually going to leave focus view so that we can actually take a peek at this library. It's a very complex library. We only have 2 components, and these 2 components, like we have a button and an icon button. We also have some like instance code down here. But for those who don't know, in Figma, The way that we describe like variations of a component is through what we call variants. And so you see all the permutations. Like this one right here is hovered. This one here is an active, a disabled, and a focus style. And then our main default style. Then we also have the secondary variant, and then the inverse variant, right? So in Figma, we create all the permutations. We can also add additional component properties. And then they all kind of go straight onto the canvas. And then that all gets wrapped in like this component set called button. So this entity is kind of like the entire button in Figma. And so if we wanted to like, let's just like look at some of the CSS that we're going to generate here. So by default, Figma generates a bunch of CSS. We also have the ability to look at iOS in Swift UI or UIKit language. And then Android, we have Jetpack Compose and XML. So these are the native languages we support out the gate. And these are going to tell you the style of what you're currently looking at, right? So if we select this one, we could see that it's this purple color. We could see that it's actually mapped to a variable in Figma. Variables in Figma are very similar to like design tokens and custom properties. So this right here is representing kind of like hopefully a token that's actually already defined in our code base. And the way that gets synced is by developers communicating with designers about this is the naming convention we use. Here's what these tokens should be. And we drive alignment there so that the native default output is accurate. Like that's kind of how some of this collaboration can really yield productivity. But we also get like the default values here. So we can see blue, we can see purple. That's great. But like we said earlier, these buttons already exist. Like we don't need to make purple right now. If I'm encountering this button in the wild, chances are I'm a front end, full stack, whatever developer that is trying to implement a button, right? And so that's the type of code that we actually have plugins, like our extensibility platform can really help generate that type of code for us. But before I move on from this, let's say that I'm the design systems engineer here and I'm like, okay, this button doesn't exist yet. We're going to play pretend. I'm writing this style from scratch. One thing that this extension does that is really cool is if I start to type, we actually get suggestions based on the Figma layer naming. So this is actually referring to class names that are being perceived by the extension in the Figma file and then being suggested by Figma right here in line. So if I do .button, right? And then in here, check this out. It's actually pulling in a bunch of this CSS from down here and actually suggesting it if I want to actually refer to it right here. So if I was building...
that looked like Copilot.
Yeah, it's very similar, right? So we actually we're making these suggestions, right? So we're making these suggestions from what's happening right here inside of this Figma code generation, which is super, super, super handy when you are styling, when you're coding the rectangle, so to speak, right? And you're being like, okay, it's this size, the border radius is this, the color is this. When you're at that stage of design to code, these things and these suggestions are going to just happen right out the gate for you with the Figma for VS Code extension. But like we said, a lot of times when that 1/3 of our developer users are actually engaging with Figma, they're engaging with the design system that's already been built by a design systems team or a UI engineer. So these buttons, like we were showing earlier, like this stuff already exists. So in that case, you want to actually have code that looks like the React button, right? If I open up my app.tsx here, if I wanted to put a button in this page or whatever, I'd be writing like button and VS Code is amazing and we're getting suggestions and it knows the TypeScript and it's like, oh yeah, you want to do all this, right? So this is what we're familiar with when we implement UI that exists in a component library. And so while that is already a great experience because VS Code rocks, we also want to be thinking about how do we generate the right code inside of Figma for that? And part of the issue when you're trying to span that gap is that teams structure their components differently. Like my button component might not be your button component, even if we're both using React and we're both have the same properties. Like we might name things differently. We might prefer camel case over hyphens, like all of those sorts of things. Those are the sorts of things that I think can vary team to team. So that's not something that Figma can just generate for you. We actually need to know more about what you want to see in order for that to happen. And one of the best ways to, we're trying to solve that big picture. And there's a lot to come later this year to that end. But one of the things that you can actually do is you can write a plugin to kind of do some of this stuff. So like I've written a plugin, little plug for a plugin called the Code Snippet Editor. And what this is going to do is it's going to just impress you out the gate with the right code. But we can talk a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes. But like, this is the code that I want to see as a full stack engineer that doesn't want to write any CSS because it's already been written and that sort of a thing. I want to just show me what I need for this specific instance of a component so that I can just plug it into my file and keep going. And so right now we can see that this is actually showing we have an icon start that's a heart. We can see that that's being pulled in here as an icon start property. If I click on this, we'll see that that's going to update to inverse icon refresh. If I click on like a disabled button here, we'll see that this translates to the right kind of like syntax for a disabled button. And so what my plugin is actually doing behind the scenes is it's rendering these snippets based on a template that me as a design systems engineer have put on the component.
Wow, that is dope. You know what this reminds me of is like if you're going through like Balma or Bootstrap or some CSS framework, right? And you get, but you can't get the specific markup for something. They just give you an example, right? And then you've got to figure out. But in this case, you just click on the thing and you get the markup for that item, which is phenomenal, man. That is really cool.
So whether you're using Bulma, Bootstrap, Tailwind UI, and like any of those things, or material design, MUI, there's so many out there. What's nice about using those existing frameworks is that like the structure of their components are set in stone. And so we want to make sure we're serving people who are using that stuff. And then we also have customers that build their own design systems, right? Like huge enterprise orgs, Microsoft, right? Like people build their own component libraries internally. And so you actually have the ability on our org and enterprise plans to like make private plugins that are just distributed on your team. They're not in our, in our community or anything like that. They're just internal tooling, and tons of our customers build these private plugins to generate the exact stuff that they need, whether they're enabling their design team or their developers with something like this. So while you were talking, I copy and pasted this and we got a little bit of linting errors. I just command period and automatically updated the imports, and we have valid code, right? We've implemented this exact button, right? We've imported the icon heart and all of this. And so this is really like the end game that we're going for, right? Is the ability to bring this sort of code in. Now, one thing that like doesn't exist yet is the ability that I'm personally pushing for, and I know the team is excited about, but also prioritizing a ton of different things. I want plugins to be able to suggest code in VS Code. I think if we could get to there, it's going to be like game over, because at that point, now I can build a plugin that actually suggests the code as you're typing it. And can actually pre-fill this without you having to do a copy and paste. Like so that would be really
typing.
Cool.
Well, so for instance, like I feel like this is a place where, and we should chat about this, but Jake, we have like Copilot extensibility, but a place where like if Copilot knew about the design system and you said, give me a purple button with a heart, that it could generate this exact markup for you.
Yeah. Yep. Like there's so many opportunities here. And like, we're like, in my mind, like this extension is really showing off already. Like there's a lot of amazing places that we can go from here. Like, and the next year is going to be very, 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 very interesting and fun. And I'm really excited. Really quick, what I'll quickly show off here is how this templating language actually works. I know we have. I'll wait for this link to come off the screen, but the code for this plugin is open source. I made it open source, so it's up on our Figma GitHub. So if you want to like use it, first of all, you can use it safely. It doesn't make web requests or anything like that, and so it's a totally safe plugin to use. If you have kind of requirements about the sorts of things that you can run at your company. Yeah, there it is. But on top of that, you can clone this yourself and do your own thing with it if you want to. So the way that this works is when I click on this main component, right? This was the kind of component set. In the settings, we can open up the editor. And this isn't the best place to do it. The best place to kind of configure this is actually inside of Figma. But these are the templates for the 3 different code snippets. So we had the one at the bottom. This was the one we were just looking at, which was the React one. And then I have an HTML one up here too that's using CSS class names just as a demo. And so let's create a new template right now.
So this markup, if I could real quick.
Yeah.
So you've got so you're going to do that, the property.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm guessing
I could
the question mark in front is an optional property.
Yeah. So then we can say, it's actually, it's my own little kind of conditional property. So I can actually just say if property variant equals primary, then say it's primary, right? And then I can do an else by doing an exclamation mark. It's not primary. So when we close this, we actually have a new code snippet down here at the bottom. So if I select this one, we see hello world primary. So we injected the actual variant. And then on this line, we're conditionally rendering its primary because it's primary. But if I select secondary, we see secondary and it's not primary. So the templating language just renders strings. Like all it does is render strings line by line. And then you can imply that it's JavaScript and you can name it as React or whatever. It doesn't do any sort of like validation or anything like that. It just renders strings using a templating language. The benefit of that being it supports whatever you want it to support. Like you don't need to wait for the plugin to support React in order for this to work. I also have the ability for you to like set your global templates. So for non-components, I don't even know where that window went. I basically have some global templates defined on my user, which allows me to generate some really cool code like this. So this is actually recursively rendering templates. So it's rendering a template for the frame, which I'm interpreting as a grid component. And then there's a typography node inside of there. Let me scroll to get this in screen. Hey, oh, look at this. So hey, oh, look at this is right here. And then we have another grid, and then we have our 2 buttons inside of it. You can't really see this. Let me move this over here like this. Boom. So we're rendering code snippets for like many nodes recursively.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Thing. Yeah. I also, before we go too far down the code gen rabbit hole, one other really cool thing about plugins inside of this environment is we can actually bring in third-party tools. So GitHub, for example, when we look at our dev resource, yeah. So they're this really cool little company. No, so on this like button component, we actually see in dev resources, we've got 2 separate links that we've created. We can add them manually right here, but we could see that this is like linked to a Jira task and it's linked to a file on GitHub. So when I come over to plugins and I run GitHub, for example, we're actually going to be able to load this file right inside here, which is great. I've authenticated my account. And then also, if we click on Jira, we can actually load the Jira task inside of here. So like, let's say this task is called build this button in our design system. And I'm a design system engineer and I'm building all this button. I can say that this is now in progress. It's done, what have you. I can flag all that stuff straight from inside of here. And so that's super helpful. If I zoom all the way out and I click off, we're actually going to see all of the tickets that are in this file. And when I click on one, it's going to jump me straight to the relevant node that ticket is for. So this sort of thing is like super, super handy to be able to do this. One last thing that I'll show here is like, so icon button. I'm going to close this plugin. We're just going to look at dev resources. We have some, please develop this ASDF are associated with our icon button. But I'm going to click on icon button.tsx and I'm going to Command Shift P, and it's in my recent history, but I'm going to link the code to the selected design. And so this node now has a new GitHub link to icon button TSX. So when I click on this, it's actually going to open this file up in my code base. So let's say I'm like opening this file for the first time and I'm select this icon button here. And I'm like, yo, I want to go like, look at this stuff. I could see that the code gen hasn't been implemented yet. But if I go to dev resources and I click on this, boom, it jumps me straight to this file so that I can get working on that icon button.
You can find where where it's actually implemented.
Yeah. So you can put that on the definition files. You could put that on the CSS files. You can do whatever you want, right? But we can create that bidirectional, or that link between GitHub and the file in our code base and the node actually inside of Figma. So super cool stuff. Yeah. I know awesome. We're already 42 minutes in. So
yeah, that's good. Let's see. So this was, I mean, you addressed this before, but I think it's worthwhile to address again, right? Like, why do all of this? Why not just go to the Figma website?
Yeah. So first of all, like, the goal here is for you to get everything out of both places. We're still catching up on some things here. Like, you can't like if you have an editor license, and which means you can add annotations and all this sort of stuff, like that all has to happen inside of Figma. There are also just like some minor like limitations here, but like the goal here, Cryptic, is to like get everything you need into this in some way or another, so that you could do that. Things like, I'm actually trying to think of some good examples of differences that like really apply to handoff. I think our goal is for you to not need to open up Figma and like not leave your workflow. But if there's anything that you see, like when you look at dev mode inside of Figma that you would like want to have inside of this environment, we'd love to hear about it. We're evolving this stuff every day.
And to me, Jake, it seems like the primary value prop here is that you're connecting the design to the implementation and code, right? And really the only way to do that is to either put the code where the design is or put the design next to the code. And if you're a developer, you're definitely going to be more comfortable in the latter, right? Because your code's already here.
Yep.
Like that's the killer feature here. And somebody actually asked, they said, Blazor component template support. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So we have, so for instance, there's a fluid or fluent, help me out here, Leighton. It's like fluent or fluent UI for Blazor, right? And it's all of these Blazor components. And so you have a website where you go and you see these components. But when you're actually working in a Blazor app, what you really want is this experience, right? You want the Figma file for that so that you can click on this Blazor button and it's like, here's the markup that you need for this button.
Yep. Actually, hold on. Let me look at this would be funny if I have this handy. I worked on a Fluent 2 template for a button and I want to see if I can quickly find it. But yeah, like the whole idea, the way that this plugin works is it stores templates on the actual node itself. So if you don't know, we actually there's a Fluent 2 web like UI kit. There's a couple other ones out there, but it's in our community, so you can actually pull that in and actually use those UI kits. And a perfect example of how a plugin like this could help would be as if you wrote templates for each of those components. Anyone running this plugin would be able to see the relevant code for that UI kit. And that would get distributed with the UI kit itself. Is that what you're talking about with Blazor, or is Blazor a separate UI kit?
Blazor's Blazor's a framework. You can think of it like React, but it's for building like front end apps with C#. So, but it's very similar to like Vue, right? And so you have these UI components that Microsoft makes, right? They're open source.
And so the Blazor language, got it.
Exactly, right. And so let's say you have like a sortable list in Blazor has its own special. It's literally exactly like React when you get right down to it. Right?
Let me see language support. We'd have the ability to, if I open up the template editor, the languages that you can render right now, we've got C++. These are all the languages that our CodeGen supports. And it's just syntax highlighting. It's not actually doing any validation on these languages. So if you were creating a new snippet, you'd select one of these languages for your syntax highlighting, which is how I get this React stuff looking like this.
So what do you have? You got plain text. What else do you have?
Yeah, do you not see this?
We can't see the pop-up. It must be
here. Really quick. This is hacks here. Dev mode is read only. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to paste. I'm in Figma design right now. I'm in a separate app. You can see my cursor.
Yeah.
This is like another example. Hello.
Wait a minute. That's the real time.
So
like
you can do, that's real time
cursor
cursor chat. So that was me in the Figma app, collaborating with me in Figma for VS Code.
Dude, that's wild.
But yeah, so these are the languages right here that we support. But if you have any like asks, we'd love. It's just a matter of syntax highlighting support.
Yeah. So what would next steps be after building out components from Figma for usability? How does a tool like Storybook come in?
So
okay, understand that.
So a tool like Storybook, Paul, is like Storybook is typically driven on the code side, right? So I'm building out like we have over here. I don't want to get too lost in the sauce trying to find that Fluent 2 Web example. So like I have in this example, stories, UI, my button stories, right? So this is an example of what it would look like to like integrate a Storybook story for your button component, right? So my button is defined out here. I'm importing that thing from my UI and I'm authoring some stories for that. Storybook is going to be the best way to kind of like look at what you have in code without having to like load it in context, right? So in the case of a button, you don't have to like open up your sign up form to look at your button. You can actually just open the story, which is going to be hosted locally, and potentially remotely with Chromatic or something like that. But it's kind of your playground for the component in your code base, right? So your component that's authored in the code base, what does that look like? How does it behave? Storybook is the best way to demo that. And so in terms of like the flow here, ideally you have a design systems designer that you're collaborating with as an engineer, right? And you're aligning the way it's designed with the way it looks in code. And your Storybook exists in code and the component also exists in Figma. And hopefully there's some parity there and some alignment. We're looking into solutions moving forward for more of like a code base driven code generation extension, right? Like we're looking for ways to use the logic that's already in your code base, whether it's a story or maybe a new file that you create, to do some of the automation you're talking about. But like, I know that the question is kind of vague, so I'm trying to hit all the spots here, but like Storybook can really help you see what is actually in your code base, like visually. But the code that you author in a story could also potentially be reused and something that we could utilize maybe to like help infer like what a good code snippet would look like. So there's a lot of potential places to overlap, Paul. I know you said you're a designer, but like the best way to think about this problem is that there's two sources of truth. One truth is what's in design and one truth is what's in code. And ideally they match, right? And ideally your truth is completely aligned, but often there's a little bit of discrepancy. Yeah. And so like, it's really about knowing everything more than it is completely being aligned in one place or another. But Storybook's a tool to do that. Figma for VS Code's a way to do that. Dev mode's a way to do that.
So here's another one. How do we annotate our code so that the Figma plugin knows where each component is being used, right? Like, do you now have to have a convention now that you're trying to marry these two things together, kind of?
They might be referring to, Colin might be referring to, so like, this is something that I've introduced personally as what I think is good practice, which is components have unique keys. And so this is actually like the button component's unique key. And I've just kind of used JS doc kind of syntax to say, hey, this is just like a little custom URI saying, hey, in my documentation, I want to make sure that in my code base, we're tracking what the heck this is inside of, and in the future, you could write an extension that potentially, I don't know, refers to this and loads it somehow. But that's what this is. Like, this to me is a good practice. You could also do like a file syntax. So another like URI thing you could do is like do a file key, of some kind, which would be a hash. This is something that I think would be really cool. I've talked to our team internally about some of this stuff, but I think the closer you can get to creating links like this, the better. But honestly, the best way to do it right now, Colin, would be to select the thing you want to link to a file, Command-Shift-P, link code to select a design. Like, that's going to be the easiest way to do it behind the scenes. So.
All right, that's a great one. All right, another one here. If currently designers have not mentioned any annotations in their design, is there any auto annotation?
Auto annotation. So
why would you want to do an auto annotation? I'm not sure I understand that.
So an example of when this would actually be a really good thing to do is like, let's say that you as an org, right, or as a team, are constantly adding the same types of annotations to certain types of things, right? So it's like any text node or any rectangle or those are actually horrible examples. Any frame with like this name, right? Like, we always want to pull out this thing and maybe put a rich text annotation that has a link to some documentation or something. You could write a plugin to do that, right? Where a plugin that says, whenever I select these things in Figma dev mode, like I click a button and it just automatically adds the same annotation to each of those, right? And maybe that annotation also has dynamic content. The plugin can handle some of that logic. So I think at scale, like once you have patterns on your team for how you document things, like a plugin is a really good way to do exactly that sort of thing. But kind of like your, initial reaction, it's like, that's a really hard thing to just globally do for everybody in a way that's valuable. That's kind of something that's on your team to really pull out and be like, hey, this would be something we should create a plugin for.
All right, well, I know we've got some more questions, but we're also kind of up on time here, Jake. So is there any other links that we want to give people? Have we put everything on the screen? Anything else people need to do, should know about?
There we go. Dev mode blog post.
That'll work.
AKA.ms. That's a nice little.
Oh yeah, that's our it's our link shortener, internal link shortener. All right. Help Center. What else?
We got Figma Help Center.
Got the extension.
Here we go. Really quick. I'm going to do it. Fluent to Web. Let's load this thing. Code snippet editor. Let's leave focus mode. Click on this button. Huzzah!
Hey, we got it.
We've got something in here. I was able to find it. Secondary default, right? I don't know how accurate this code is, but this was just to demonstrate you can do it for a bunch of different UI kits in our.
All right, awesome. So Jake, you can't get out of here without going through our lightning round. So
cool,
producer, let's pull Jake's screen off and put Jake up here on the hot seat if we can. All right, Jake.
We get it.
Nice. Did you like that animation?
Yeah,
it's for the lightning round. It's pretty cool. All right, Jake.
Crack of lightning.
What's your favorite code editor?
VS Code.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Second question. GIF or GIF?
GIF, because graphics.
That is the correct answer. Yes. Just making
Hard
notes
G.
here to share back with your manager on these
Thank you.
on these answers.
You'll have
Jason
no
or
performance.
Jason?
I don't know. Let me see how I say it. When I do JSON.parse, JSON.stringify, Jason. I say Jason.
Jason. That is also correct. Tabs or spaces?
Spaces, 2.
Yes, that is also correct. Types or no types?
Depends on what I'm doing. Types if I'm building something that's supposed to last. No types if I'm trying to be creative.
Huh.
And sprint and build something quickly.
I mean, usually the answer I give is no types, but I'll accept that. You know what, Jake? I think that's it for the lightning round. Thank you so much for being with us today, y'all.
Thank you.
You got to check out Figma. Make sure you grab that extension. You're probably, and if you aren't sure if you're using Figma where you work, there's a good chance you are. So check with your design folks as well. And where can we find you, Jake? Can people find you on Twitter?
I don't really use Twitter anymore. I used to. I've Jake at front-end.social is my Mastodon. I also have jake.fun is my website. I got a whole bunch of projects on there. My GitHub's on there.
That's a good one. That's pretty easy. Jake.fun.
And then just search my name on LinkedIn. Happy to connect.
Awesome. Anything else?
Nothing.
All right.
This was really nice.
Your favorite Netflix show? You want to talk about that?
Favorite Netflix show? I don't actually know off the top of my head what my favorite Netflix show is. What's the wildest thing you have in front of you
right now?
Yeah, on your desk. I wasn't prepared, but I'm gonna find something.
I don't have anything. Yeah.
You don't have anything?
I mean, I got some eye drops, a pair of headphones, a bottle of pills.
Okay, I've got a book that was my grandpa's called "Plants Are Like People." I haven't read it.
Wait, your grandpa wrote it, or
no? It just belonged to him.
Oh, okay.
And it, it's old because it's got the red pages. Plants are like people, and then modern trigonometry. His modern trigonometry book where he like wrote a bunch of just trying to figure out math. I guess.
Light reading, man, for a rainy Saturday.
College dropout. Plants are like people. Modern trigonometry.
All right, Jake. Thank you so much for being here, Chad. We'll see you back next week. Next week? I don't know if we have a stream next week. We'll either have a stream next week or we won't. Either way. Have a great weekend. And y'all drop in and thank Jake for being here, spending his Thursday with us. He's a busy guy. We appreciate him coming on. And we appreciate Figma and the great work they're doing. So thanks a lot, chat. Talk to you soon. Bye, Jake.
Thanks, y'all.